Authority of Guam board meeting yesterday where they're ratifying a resolution. Hi, BJ. Good morning. Public Auditor BJ Cruz here in our KUM News Link Zoom room.
Good morning.
I just wanted to kind of go into this. Well, I guess, first of all, your reaction to that little clip that we had just played.
Well, as I stated in the letter that I just sent, a letter that I sent you, that I had sent to Roy in the port last week, was I'm glad that a department is finally taking our performance audits to heart and actually implementing a corrective action plan. It is required that after performance audit that the auditee establish a corrective action plan and get it implemented within 6 months of the audit. Unfortunately, most departments don't. And so we told him that we were glad that he was finally going to do it, and the fact that he was going to go to the board for ratification, because in both audits that we did of the port, we found that this action should have gone to the for ratification before the board. You'll note in the letter that I sent him that though they went for ratification, they did not implement the recommendation that we made in the finding. Yes, we did ding them on the fact that they were using the last 3 years the employee was there. But the problem that we found in both sets of audits was that when the current board went back to find the last 3 performance audits of the employees, they could not and did not find 3 performance evaluations that were signed by the GM. We pointed that out in the first audit, that employee Q, he had 2 audits that hadn't been signed by the GM at the time that year that he was supposed to be signed. And we found that in the personnel rules and regulations, it explicitly says the supervisor shall do the performance evaluation and shall submit it to the general manager, who will sign it and certify it. But these things were not signed. What was done at the port last night was they've now given the authority of the incumbent GM, the GM at the time today, to go back and sign the signature, put a signature on a performance evaluation that a port general manager 8 and 9 and 10 years ago did not sign for some reason. As auditors, we could not divine or read the minds of the auditors, of the GM at the time, to know why they didn't do it. We just assumed because it wasn't signed that it was, according to the personnel rules and regulations, that it was not certified and approved. And in one instance, in this case, we actually found that one of the employees in, I think it was S or T, I can't remember, but one of the employees in her settlement agreement required that, or demanded, that the port pay a salary increment from a year before the employee was terminated, before 2012. That to us was evidence of the fact that the non-signature by the general manager at the time meant that the increment couldn't have been implemented and given to the employee. But now, 8 years later, the current board, general manager signed what the GM at the time that was working with that employee refused to sign, and it's now their rules. And we recommended in our audit that what they do is that the board establish something within the personnel rules and regulations that states when an employee is reinstated, they shall get X number of a percentage per year, and have that established in the board, in the personnel rules and regulations. And we recommended that it be 2%, not 5% like everybody has been getting. And that was the recommendation that we made. What the board did last night, or at least, I don't know, I wasn't listening to it, but it seems they ratified a proposal that was submitted by Roy that said that the action of the incumbent GM to sign the personal performance evaluations from 2010, 2011, and 2012 is ratified, and that the actions of the port to give 5% or 4% to the employee regardless was now ratified. And in the letter that I just sent
can
to
I just
you,
read
you'll
this
see that
letter? So this is a correspondence from Public Auditor BJ Cruz back to Port GM, current Port GM Roy Respicio. And in this letter, you kind of point out here that, well, you do point out here that the use of average ratings of the employee's last 3 years' employment at the port to calculate for the annual salary increments, and this is in bold italics, is not an audit recommendation, but the port management's proposal. If the board ratifies this management proposal, OPA will acknowledge and respect the board action. So you're saying it's not what you put in the audit, but if they passed it, then fine. You respect it?
we have to. We've asked them to do something. They've done something that might not be exactly what we wanted, but they at least got ratification. And now they have, hopefully, they now have a personnel rules and regulations amendment that gives them the authority to do this. It's most unfortunate, but it is what it is. I'm sorry.
No, you
we
didn't.
Did our recommendation.
You didn't just use the "it is what it is." Not the public auditor.
You'll note in the letter that I bolded that line. That It is not our audit recommendation. It is the port management's. But if it's ratified, we have to accept it.
BJ, what about the other findings in the audit? There were some other things that I didn't.
Well, no, there were a number of things. We criticized them on the fact that in calculating the back wages that are due, the employee is supposed to provide proof of mitigation. It's supposed to be the way that you figure out how much they're due is you go back and you look and see how much would they have made during the period that they were not employed at the port, 7 or 8 years, and you get that number, and then you mitigate it, meaning you subtract from it whatever the employee provided, earned during that period outside. When we did the first audit, employee Q, he provided all the W-2s, and he provided proof from each of the 4 employers that he had during that period, and how much he made on from each of those employers. In this audit, in S&T, one employee provided nothing at all, just said an amount, and it was accepted. The other employee gave their personnel action plan from a Gugwam employee department that they were going to work for, about what the salary was going to be. But they didn't provide a W-2 form. They didn't provide tax returns from those years to to show that that is in fact how much they earned during those years. There was no due diligence done by the port to determine what really was earned by the employees while they were out, and so we question that. I mean, the other thing that we questioned was maybe the potential prohibition on retroactive pay that came to light during this audit. We noticed that one of the demands with the settlement agreement was that they get their increment for the period in FY19 that Gov Guam was supposed to be in austerity, and there was not supposed to be any increments. And in fact, since I was the chairman of appropriations at that time, I specifically wrote into it that they were not supposed to be reimbursed that later, because that, you know, and they got it, and we pointed it out as a finding, and the response that we got back from the port was, we checked with BBMR, and BBMR told them that since they weren't getting an appropriation from the general fund, that it didn't cover them, didn't cover the port. And the port also responded that the CCU issued a resolution stating that that budget prohibition in FY19 didn't apply to them. I pointed out to we pointed out to the port that, if you remember, just 3 months ago, the Attorney General, in an opinion about GURA, stated that GURA was a government entity, and the prohibition in FY19 applied to GURA. And it applied to all agencies, whether they're autonomous or optimus. It did cover them, and that they shouldn't have done that. The Attorney General opinion was to GURA, and GURA was fighting it. I don't know what they finally ended up doing, but the question hasn't been raised about what we do about the port and what we do about the utilities.
There was also
the interesting thing that we discovered in at the port was when we did an audit of what they did during those months. What happened was the legislature passed the budget bill in August. Okay, and we had this prohibition in there. The port, realizing that there was going to be this prohibition against increments during FY19, in mid-September passed a resolution awarding the increments earlier, so that it wasn't after October 1st, but they increased everybody 2 weeks before October 1st, so that they could claim that they didn't raise anybody's salaries during the FY.
Pretty slick.
And we just said, well, though this only applied to the employee for a 2-week period, we don't know how much it cost for the entire port to give all of its employees, all its 400 employees, increments during that year when the rest of the government was in austerity, and so we couldn't calculate what that was. The other thing that we found was we found a conflict of interest, or at least we found a potential conflict of interest, in that all of this work was done by the deputy GM. And the deputy GM prior position was the chairman of the Civil Service Commission. And if you read the audit and you go to the appendices, you'll find in the appendix the Civil Service Commission orders for these two employees, and you'll find on those orders the signature of the current deputy GM. And when we pointed this out to the port, they sent us back a response. They didn't think that it was a conflict of interest because he wasn't related. He wasn't getting any financial gain from it. And the deputy GM submitted an affidavit to that effect and stated, yeah, I was at the Civil Service Commission until December the 12th, 2019. On December the 13th of 2019, I became the deputy GM. And yeah, the following week, I negotiated all of these settlements. And these were settlements that he did, at least he didn't say in his thing, that he had been the one that ordered them.
Yeah, BJ, so does that...
And to the credit of my employees, we had all attended the ethics class because there's that new law that everybody's supposed to take ethics.
Yeah.
We attended an ethics class as a group, and in it we learned about conflict of interest and the fact that employees should not be acting on something that they were involved in their previous employment. And so we pointed it out as a potential. We just pointed it out. I mean, that's for the Ethics Commission to establish, or actually until the Ethics Commission is established. Ironically, the ethics issues are supposed to be addressed by the Civil Service Commission.
Wow. BJ, this just sounds like the biggest OOG. But yeah, you didn't see any of those other concerns in the resolution. And I just got to say, like, what is the board doing? Do they read these audits?
Well,
I mean,
no,
do they? Because I mean,
we'll
I feel like
when we do the next audit, we'll probably point out what we, the issues that we have. But I have to accept and respect the fact that an action was taken, a resolution was presented, and they deliberated and they acted. Whether or not it's going to pass the test of approval, recently there was all this issue of the agendas having to be explicit in what they're going to be doing. I haven't looked at the agenda to determine whether or not it meets those specifications and whether or not it was clear that what the port was going to be ratifying last night was the settlement agreement that settled almost $3.5 million worth of back pay.
So basically you're saying that these $100,000 cherry on tops of these superior, exceptional, you're the most awesome employee we ever had when you weren't working here, back wage calculations, that since the board has come out with a resolution ratifying the method, that they're basically above reproach and they've successfully covered their ass. Is that what you're saying?
I lost you.
Are you saying that this board resolution and ratification of this whole process is, does it effectively cover the port's ass?
Well, yeah, that's what ratification is that what may have been a questionable act has now been approved by the board. And so now it's the board that has ratified what we found as wrong, or at least we had issues with, and supposedly made it right. And in our next audit, I guess we'll see whether or not that was sufficient.
Do you think there's any other remedies? Is the AG doing a review? I think he is.
Well, the AG is going to, I guess, we'll look and make a determination on whether or not the port has to comply with the FY19 austerity and freeze. And and give specific directions to them that yes, it applies to you regardless of what BBMR and the CCU says, that the attorney, I as the Attorney General, have opined that it applies to all agencies. So,
BJ, in that
I'm
clip,
not sure.
in that clip we just played with former Senator Judy Guthertz and current Port Board member Judy Guthertz, would you say that she twisted your words in that clip? Because it kind of sounded that way to me. But I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
Well, I didn't hear her that clearly, but I'll have to listen to the tape later. But no, I trust Judy tried her best to weave in what the port wanted, what the port did, and tried to convince the board that we need to make this right by having a personnel rules and regulations that addresses how we reinstate employees. That was not what we recommended. We recommended that there be a provision that states that there was a certain percentage to be given, not that the incumbent GM was supposed to go back and do what a GM didn't want to do 8 or 9 or 10 years ago, and sign a performance evaluation that they had no idea. The incumbent GM did not even know what these employees were doing at the port 10 years ago. How could he know whether or not that employee was deserving of a 5% increase at that time? Or was an excellent employee at the time?
Outstanding.
And the thing that we pointed out is that, and we're trying to get the legislature to address this, to try to have some equity between the autonomous agencies and the regular GovGuam. In GovGuam, the highest you can get if you get an exceptional, outstanding exceptional rating, the highest you can get as an increase is 3.5%. At the port, you can get 6% increase annually. And in GovGuam, after you get to a certain level, I think it's step 10. You don't get an annual performance evaluation. It's every 18 months,
right? Yeah.
So that you spread out the period in which these employees are getting these huge raises.
Right.
The port has it every 12 months, like clockwork. They go up 5% for everybody, and that's substantial.
Yeah, it is. Maybe that's why they I don't know if you saw this release that came out from the port, news release. Port climate survey shows high morale. And this came out yesterday too. Did you get this one, BJ?
No, but and you'll see in this, if you read this audit, you'll see that this one employee left the port at 89,000 a year and came back at 114 because of all the 5% increases that she received.
Nice. Well, I commend you for continuing to point out all these red flags.
Well, we point them out and we hope somebody does something. Well, the port board did something. They've now ratified it. But I'm hoping that the legislature looks at it and tries to provide equity between the 12,000 GovGuam employees and the employees of the autonomous agencies that get 5% increases annually, and the GovGuam employees who get 1 or at the most 3% per annum.
Right.
And some don't even get it for 18 months.
Right. Yeah. Well, thank you for this, BJ. But just before we let you go, the above step audit, sole source procurement, your work calendar for calendar year 2022, pretty juicy stuff. You have any status? I mean, have you guys started any of those?
No, we haven't started. We're still trying to clean up the audits that we have outstanding, and I hope, the other thing is, did you see our CFA one?
I did briefly, yes. Did you want to touch on that a little bit?
Well, no offense, Chris, but, the government spends tens of thousands, if not millions, actually, in doing these audits. And really, people need to read them. In the CFA audit, realizing that people don't want to read, and even the 2-page highlights that I put on might be too much. We put a visual 1-page infographic on it, and in it we pointed out that there were some issues in there. We pointed out potential conflict of interest in that the chairman of the board of CFA is also a sibling of the owner of Eagle, which is the vendor that provides the school and the supplies at the school, and has a $2.4 million contract with CFA. And I also pointed out something interesting that happened last year. I mean, when I was chairman of appropriations, we appropriated over 6 million, but anywhere from 6.5 or above, or around that area, per student for the school. So during the last 3 years, CFA has gotten its 6 million plus for whatever number of students that it had enrolled at the school. All right. Someone got in the last budget a provision that the charter schools could use unencumbered funds from prior years to satisfy outstanding prior year obligations. Last year, CFA submitted to the Department of Administration a request for $1.1 million. And if you look on in the infographic, on the budgeted amounts and the actual amounts received, I think the difference each year of the budgeted amount and the actual amount, which is how many employees they actually had, that difference is that 1.1. And they got the $1.1 million from the Department of Administration, and that 1.1 million went directly to pay prior year outstanding on the $2.4 million, and that went straight to Eagle in the Philippines.
Straight to the sibling.
Yep.
Wow. Well, it is juicy. BJ, while you called me out on not reading this audit for CFA, I apologize. I'm looking at it now, though. We're going to pop it up in our Facebook Live feed. But I thank you. I got to jump over to KUM TV. Did you want to hang on through the break real quick and we'll wrap? Or if you got to go, you got to go.
All right.
Okay. Thank you, BJ. Last question, though. I did have one. There was a comment. Do you think that there should be a legislative oversight hearing on this very conflicting and worrisome actions that the Port Authority has taken?
That is a decision the legislature is going to have to make. I've very stayed away from saying what they should do. I make recommendations.
Thank you, BJ. Have a good weekend. Be safe.
Thank you.
There you go. Public Auditor BJ Cruz. Yep. I mean, pointing these things out in the audit, like you said, what are they going to do about it? So 8:04 KUAM TV. It is Friday morning. Let's go ahead and jump over. We're going to do our 8 o'clock newscast, guys, so stick around. We got a special address from the governor that she released yesterday. I called it yesterday. I said it's crazy. Cases are crazy. I feel a YouTube video coming down. And we have it. And it's coming up here on the link, KUAM TV. Fix yourself. Here we come.